either a candidate for failure or a candidate for sustainable, continuous prosperity. And he has written a book, and if you would like, he'll tell you how to get that on Amazon. And again, here is Marcus.
Hi, thank you for letting me come out. I really appreciate it. I just wrote a book. It's called California's Next Century 2.0. It is available on Amazon in print and electronic format. So if you have an e-book or a smartphone, you can read it there. I'm going to give a speech, then I'll take some questions, and I will be here for any other questions anybody else has. But I just wanted to say, you have flyers in front of you. I'm working with a group called calsoft.org. If you go to calsoft.org, there's a web page, and we have a Facebook page. We're trying to get the word out. California has 40 million people. That takes an incredible amount of effort. So, if you hear in this speech something that you haven't heard before, and you think maybe other Californians should at least be informed, if you would please consider referring me to any other organization, Republican group, conservative group. I am trying to get the word out. Any links I'd appreciate. Okay, so let me just start by saying that here's what you could have. This is what I'm promising for California's next century. Half of your taxes gone. Half the bureaucracy of every business in California wiped out. The debt paid off, California out of the recession. Infrastructure brought up to first world status, which means businesses would grow. And an international trade-focused economy, which means businesses would grow. Plus, effectively no unemployment ever. And effectively no recession ever. Yes, yes. I know that's a tall claim, but I just want to point out that I've already received positive book reviews by Midwest Book Review, San Francisco Book Review, foreign policy scholar James O. Goldsboro, and 4 different independent think tanks, the Independent, Pacific, Claremont, and Milken Institute are reviewing this plan now. Plus you can see book reviews at Facebook and Amazon if you type in California's Next Century 2.0 or Marcus Ruiz Evans. So, here's what can happen. Now I'm going to get into somewhat of the negative material, but we're going to come back around and things will end positive. Trust me. Okay. Everybody see the cow? Cow looks very sick. It's definitely not a happy California cow, right? You can see the bones, it's emaciated. This cow's about ready to fall over and die. That's right. I want you, when you see this cow, to think of yourself. To think of California. Because this cow represents California and how it's treated by America. Sorry, I'm going to explain that to you right now. But as I go over the stats, keep this image in your head, because this is us. And it's been us for 30 years. I'll repeat that. Everything I'm about to talk about has gone on for 3 decades. It's not new, and it's not going away, and if you don't work on it now, guess what's going to happen in another 30 years? The exact same thing. So, here's how you are this sickly, almost dying cow. Number 1, you pay about $80 to $120 billion, $80 to $120 billion in extra federal income tax that you never get anything for. You pay federal income taxes. It pays for military, Social Security, etc. That's all well and good. And then there's extra money left over that goes from the federal government in grants to about 35 other states to pay for roads, dams, bridges, seaports, airports, levees, federal buildings, and schools. Now here's the kicker. The federal government rates all of these things across all of America every single year. California has the worst roads, dams, schools, bridges, seaports, airports, levees, you name it, according to the federal government for decades.
Government too.
Yes. This is official federal government saying this. Yet, for 30 years, You have continued to pay $80 to $120 billion so that other states can have roads, bridges, dams, seaports, airports, and levees better than you. I want to make sure I'm explaining this. They already have all of this better than you. You're down here, worst in all of America. They're up here. Yet you pay for them to continue to have it better than you. You've done this for 30 years. How many of you were aware of this? Okay, just take a look around. That was 4 people. I've given this speech at 40 California cities. That's about the average. Most Californians are completely unaware that they are literally milked almost to death and have been doing so for almost as long as I've been alive. Think about that. That means this is not going to change. They have a precedent. This cow doesn't know it's being milked to death. So why would the farmer stop milking that cow? Cow's completely ignorant it's about to die. You're going to keep milking that cow then, right? Now what happens if the cow becomes aware? Think about that for a second. And think about this. How many of you enjoy paying your state income taxes? Raise your hands. Okay. Now, how many of you would be happy to find out that you completely wasted your state income tax? Okay. I know. All right. But here's what I'm getting at. The state income tax pays for the entire state of California budget. $80 to $120 billion that you pay in extra federal income taxes, aka welfare, wealth redistribution, whatever you want to call it, is equivalent to one state of California budget. So you give away all of your state income tax in welfare for things you never see. That's how much money we're talking about. If you didn't do that, you would have a 200% statewide budget. You would have no finance issues. You would have no debt. There would not be issues. You could pay teachers 5 times what they actually deserve, and you would have money left over and you could cut taxes. That's the kind of cash we're talking about. Now when I bring this up to people, they go, well, we should have more efficiencies. Yes, we should. Efficiencies are going to get you a couple $1 million. Why take that when there's $120 billion left that's your money and is being robbed from you? Why is that okay? And why is it okay it's gone on for 30 years? Upset? A little bit, maybe? Okay, it gets worse. So, for the money that you do pay, and the services you do get, not the extra welfare money, you don't actually get those services. Border security. You pay money for border security. Every country on the earth takes care of policing its borders, except the American government when it comes to California. So, you pay federal income taxes. It's supposed to protect the border. The feds don't do it. The state government dips into your state fund to provide additional resources and manpower at the border so you actually have a protected border. So that's 200% tax. You pay once, you get nothing. You dip back into your state budget to actually get what you need. But it gets worse. How many of you would consider that national security is a basic job of every government on earth? I would, right? Okay. Now, please raise your hands if you knew this, because I'm going to bet not one of you is going to raise your hand. Here it is. How many of you knew that for 5 years after 9/11, you never got your 9/11 security money? You did. One person. Okay. That's awesome. So, America's attacked at 9/11. President goes on the air, we're going to fight terrorism. We're going to take this, we're protecting America. Okay, and then for 5 years, half a decade, California never gets the money it needs to actually protect itself from terrorism. We're going to go fight terrorism, we're going to do all this. California, you get nothing. For half a decade. Half a decade. Well documented. I'll get to that in a little bit. So here's the thing. Michael Chertoff, the director of Homeland Security, when he retired, said that California was the most vulnerable spot in all of America for a terrorist attack. And yet California got nothing. So, America's fighting the war on terror, California's the #1 weak spot, California gets nothing. Do you know who actually paid so that you have nuclear radiation detectors at your seaports so that the terrorists can't sneak a nuclear bomb into California and blow you up? You did. There was a special trucker tax of $20 on each container that came through the Oakland ports and LA San Pedro ports. That meant that the cost of local goods delivered to the local California economy went up. So you pay for national security, you get nothing. Then you pay for additional trucker, aka goods rows, so that's a 200% tax for national security. But it gets worse. How many of you know that every single year we have forest fires? Giant forest fires. Hundreds of homes burned. Sometimes people actually get burned alive. Those are called national emergencies for a reason, because they're so huge. Federal government says, oh, forest fires, that is a national emergency. Money is supposed to come with national emergencies. That's why you're part of the nation. Guess what? You never get your money. So here's what happens. You pay federal income tax for national emergencies, for things like this, like what happened in New Orleans and New Jersey. Nothing ever happens. Then your governor borrows state money to go to Nevada and Arizona to rent helicopters and personnel so that you actually have the people you need to put out that fire. So that's 3 types of 200% tax, plus 1 full state budget wasted every single year for 30 years. How many of you knew that? That whole picture? 1 person, exactly. So what I want you to think about is, what if all of you knew that? And what if everyone in California knew that? What's the dynamic then? Because right now, what we're dealing with is a situation where 1% of Californians are aware of this. But it gets worse. Because California's economy is internationally trade focused. It's about 25 to 45%. All businesses in California are linked into the international economy. So, Governor Schwarzenegger, when he was governor, goes to Asia with California business leaders. They meet Asian counterparts, work out the deals, sign the contracts, get all the paperwork done. He comes back to America, goes to Washington, D.C., meets his fellow Republican president. We're in a recession. This will get us 100,000 jobs. Can you please approve these trade deals, Mr. President George W. Bush? No, he doesn't. For 5 years. 100,000 jobs, ready to go. Washington just has to sign the paperwork. Sorry, California, you get nothing. Now, here's the kicker. Barack Obama's no different. Barack Obama sat on the trade deals for 5 years. Don't believe me. Check it out in the book. You have a Republican president. California is ready to get 100,000 jobs. No, we will not approve this. You have a Democrat president. California is ready to get 100,000 jobs to get ourselves out of the recession. No. 5 years, nothing. Here's why. The average U.S. state, 5% of their economy is linked to the international economy. California, it's 45%. So things that are important to us are simply not important at the federal level. There's a book by Abraham Lowenthal. He's a professor at USC, very conservative school, and he's a professor at University of Long Beach. He works on international trade. He wrote a book called Global California Rising, where he documents the billions of dollars we lose out every year, because our economy's shifted here, and the rest of 49 states' economy's over here. And every time we need approval for something, or a business person needs something happens, it's just not important. Do you know how long it takes to get special California laws passed at the national level? It's 10 years on average. Now try telling a California business person, oh, you need something done for your business? Hey, just wait a decade. That's not going to work. So, those are the ways that California is being hurt, is looking like the scout. Now I'm going to talk about something that's even worse, at a whole other level. But don't worry, because I'm going to come back around with the solution. So, in the next 10 to 20 years, there are going to be 7 superpowers. Their names are going to be America, the European Union, Russia, China, India, Brazil, and possibly a Southeast Asian collective known as ASEAN. This is going to happen. Now, the interesting thing is that since World War II, and roughly for the last century, the world was broken up into 2 spheres. America represented capitalism and democracy, and then there was the other option represented by the USSR. Dictatorial control over everyone's lives and over the economy. Well, most of the world, from 1945 to 1985, chose the American version. The other version was horrible. Now, things are different. Now we're entering into a new century where America will only be one of 7 options providing democracy and capitalism. China has democracy. It's at a very low level, at the community level, and China is thoroughly capitalist. But China's nothing like America. Europe's nothing like America. So what happens when America isn't the only good option in the future, but one of 7? Is the world going to choose the American model? Will they always side with America? Or will they look at the Indian model, the Russian model, the Brazilian model, the ASEAN model? Who knows? There they are. That's the new superpowers. The country and then the actual population. So, population, landmass. Foreign policy scholars in America have said that the period that we're going into in the next 20 to 40 years most closely resembles another recent period in history. And that is the period from 1880 to 1910. Or the lead up to World War I and World War II. You all know the rest of the story. So, what happened then? Most of the world was owned by Europe in the late 1800s. France, England, etc. Then there were these new countries that just formed. And they wanted their own empire and their piece of the world. And they wanted to be a France and England too. And so they went out and started conquering pieces of the world and forming their own colonies. And for a while, international trade worked out. Those countries' names were Italy, Germany, and Japan. New rising powers, hungry for their piece. Not going to be a junior partner to England and France, going to stand equal. Worked out for a while. And then somewhere along the line, Germany walks out of the League of Nations. Japan walks out of the League of Nations. Italy walks out of the League of Nations. And you know the rest of the story. So here's what's happening. China is making its own UN, called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's inviting countries around China to join. It's making it look exactly like the UN, and guess what? America's banned from being part of it. Russia is doing the exact same thing. India is doing the exact same thing. Brazil is doing the exact same thing. ASEAN is doing the exact same thing. And even the Europeans are looking into their own version. New UNs, 7 UNs, each one America's banned from. That looks a lot like what happened in 1890. American foreign policy scholars are pointing this out. Does that mean that we're on the same trajectory and we're going to go to World War III? Who knows? Who knows? That's the honest answer. They don't know because we do not talk about this in America. We don't have this conversation. It's not brought up. There are no plans. This isn't addressed. So nobody has any clue and nobody has any proposals. So here's the solution. If you go on Wikipedia and you try to look up where most of the international peace negotiations happened, it was in a little city called Geneva, Switzerland. The Red Cross, most business deals between international corporations, between international businesses and nations, etc., for the last 200 years were agreed in this place called Geneva, Switzerland. And here's why. The Swiss are part French, German, Italian, and this group called Romansh. And then later on they made English a national language. So what they did in the 1800s was they went to Europe and they said, we speak your language. France, we speak your language. We know your culture. We know how to think. We can talk your way. Germany, same thing. Austria, same thing. England, same thing. Italy, same thing. And we Swiss, while we have all these languages and cultures, view ourselves as Swiss. So we are the living embodiment of all the European nations working together, and we know how to speak your language and talk your talk. You should make us your natural, neutral negotiation center, Europe. That was the deal Switzerland made to Europe 200 years ago, and Europe bought it. But now, Europe's only going to be one of the new superpowers. There's going to need to be a Chinese, Indian, Brazilian, American, ASEAN version. In the last 2 years, the mayor of Geneva and the government of Switzerland have said that they can no longer be the neutral peace negotiation center for the world like they've been for the last 200 years, they are giving it up. Because they worked well when the world was owned by European powers. Europe's going to be one power. Chinese, Indian, Brazilian, Asian people don't look at the old peace order negotiation centers, the UN and Geneva, Switzerland, as representing them. And here's why. There has never been a president or oversecretary of the UN or IMF or G20 or any of those groups that's not an American or European for 70 years. So when you try to tell China, the UN's about you, but no Chinese person has ever run this organization in a century, they don't buy it. And neither does India, and neither does Russia, and neither does Brazil, and neither does ASEAN. And they got something to it. You had a century to put some other people in office and you never did it. And now you want to say it's about them? They're just not buying it. They're making their own organization. So, how do we stop the old world order from falling apart? And how do we stop California being abused? The answer is the same. So, where is the future's neutral negotiation center that can keep peace for the next world order? It's California. And here's why. I look around the world. I study every country on the planet. California is the only place, land, people, area, whatever, that has all of these superpower peoples having lived together in one area for over a century. No other country, land, people, place, anything comes remotely close. Israel does all right, but Israel's got 3 of the 7 superpowers. California's the only one with 7. So we are the only one who comes remotely close to having the dynamics to be the peace center for the next century the way the Swiss were 200 years ago. We can take over the economy the Swiss are giving up. And here's why. Because nobody else is going to step into the void. If we don't do it, it's literally not going to happen. There literally will be no more centers and the world will continue to spin into who knows what. So what I'm telling you is that the way to make California rich, to have no unemployment, to have no recession, to have half taxes, to have half bureaucracy, to make sure that you have the best schools in the world and the best infrastructure in the world, and that you can tell your kids they're always going to have a job into the next century, it's for us to take over this role. And if we don't, what I'm also saying is that you are gambling with your world security. Because America's guessing that this doesn't happen. We're not talking about it. It's 10 years into the war on terror. How many of you feel that we're completely safe now? How many of you have heard a politician say, oh, the war on terror is going to end on this year, and here's our goals for achieving it? You haven't. They have no goals for how they're going to end the war on terror. Nobody knows when it's going to end, and it's not made the world safer. So what if we fight the war on terror another 20 years? Not going to make things better? Here's the thing. War on terror doesn't deal with any of these dynamics. We aren't even talking about this. No American politician talks about Mercosur, Shanghai Cooperation Council. They just don't. The solution is you, and it's here. You take over this role because you're the only one can. You get the economy of Switzerland. Switzerland doesn't have unemployment. Switzerland doesn't have recessions. Switzerland has the highest social living standard for the last 100 years, and they've been the wealthiest country in the world for the last 200 years. That's not an accident. It's because while the recessions happen globally, and there will be other recessions, Switzerland always has people coming in to negotiate and discuss business deals and do negotiations. Even when times are bad, businesses still have to negotiate. Countries still have to make agreements. So Switzerland had a recession-proof global economy. That's why they have all that. They're giving it up. They can't do it. Nobody's going to take it over. It's literally us or nobody. Can we pull up for one?
Well, yeah, I remember.
Okay, well, just write it down. I'll get the questions. Just almost done. Okay, so here's the kicker. How do we get there? Now, how many of you have heard what's happened in Scotland in the last 5 years? Same person. You are awesome. Send me your email, I'll give you a free book. Scotland in the last 5 years, let me back up. Scotland for the last 400 years has been a colony of England. There was a couple Scottish legislators in London, but basically everything that happened in Scotland was decided by British people. In the last 5 years, 98% of the policies have returned to Holyrood, the capital of Scotland, with what the Scottish call sub-national sovereignty. I'll repeat that, sub-national sovereignty. Here's the key. All Scottish boys and girls participate in the British military. They just fought the war in Afghanistan. The Queen of England gave them a commendation for their valor. That's post-sub-national sovereignty. The Scots still use the British pound. All business negotiations between Scotland and England don't change. But everything else does. Immigration, education, banking, streets and roads, all returns to Holyrood. So, how many of you remember how we got into this recession? They were giving out bad home loans, packaging them up, and then selling them without naming what they are to another person who didn't know what they were buying. Nobody's gone to prison in America for that. Nobody's gonna go to prison. No, they're not even talking about that. People are gonna get off scot-free. Now, while the Scots don't have control of the British pound, they do have control over banking. And if you pull that junk in Scotland, you go to federal prison for 30 years. We can have the same system. The dollar stays intact, the military, Homeland Security Department, all that stays intact, business contracts, all that stays intact. But the issues that Californians are constantly arguing about, immigration, education, taxes, border security, national security, return to us. And you decided here. Now, if you do that, you can have half taxes. You can have half bureaucracy. You can have infrastructure across California brought up to first world status. And you can have your economy designed for international trade, which means that when California is ready to grow 100 to 500,000 new jobs, we don't have to wait a decade. That's the key to making all these things happen. Now, I know that sounds radical, but there's a couple things you should know. There are 25 other nations around the world with the exact same form of government found in all parts of the world, meaning it's universally applicable. They are all democracies, they are all stable countries, and they all have excellent relations with their host nation. Plus, not hypothetical, British legal scholars in the Guardian newspaper have already said that California deserves this. Foreign ambassadors in other nations have already said that California deserves this. And let's talk about America. If California does this, the world is safer in a way that America is not even talking about how to provide security. If California does this, California's economy grows because it's more linked to the international economy. But because it's still linked to the US economy, the American economy grows. Foreign investment and foreign trade with America has dropped drastically in the last 10 years. America has a gigantic image problem. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that there are national polls that show pretty much every single country outside of America has a negative image of America. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying it is. It's a perception issue. This improves the perception. This links America back into international trade. It grows the US economy and it makes the world safer. But here's another key point, because one of the questions I get at a lot of these events is, America will never allow this, they'll never go for it, it'll never happen. Yeah, I see people nodding their heads. How many of you people that think this will never happen, it's too radical, know the next couple facts I'm going to give you? One, the federal government has already given up control over environmental regulation, insurance regulation, retirement regulation, and before Obamacare, healthcare regulation. They did not do that for any other state. They did that for California because they said California was essentially ungovernable. So they are giving up powers to California that they hold in reserve for 49 other states because we are too big. They are already doing this and have been doing this on their own. We did not ask. They said, you know what, why don't you just run with this because we're tired of doing it. So they're giving up power already. How many of you knew that 2 Supreme Court justices went to Congress in the last 10 years and asked for a separate California Supreme Court system? Did you know that? That happened. The Ninth Circuit District of California is 40% of national Supreme Court cases. The Supreme Court wants a separate California system because they cannot govern California. It is too much. It's taking too many of the national resources. So the feds have given up insurance, environmental, retirement. They did healthcare before the president took it on, and they're looking at giving up the law. They're already doing this. Now, if you would please raise your hands. How many of you knew that? What I just said in the last 2 minutes. So when we talk about this as a radical plan, what I want you to think is, things are horrible in California right now. There are no plans to fix it. This is a plan to fix it. It is a plan to make it permanently fixed. It would make the world safer. It would improve the American economy. And America is already moving this way. I know it's a radical idea, but again, I've done this in 40 cities. The reaction's always the same. There's about 2% of the people who are like, oh, that'll never happen. And then there's about 95% of the people going, never heard your book, where is it, I want to read. No, I at least deserve more information. And that's all I'm asking for. Think about it. Because there are no plans to get us out of the recession. Because nobody has an idea when we're getting out of recession. Because nobody's talking about what's going to keep world peace. Because America certainly isn't working on this issue. So, here are your options. You look at something radical that could work, or you do nothing and wait and see what happens. And maybe there's World War III, and maybe you're in a recession in another 20 years, who knows? Those are both stark options, but what I want you to realize is that you're choosing. You're choosing to look into this, or you're choosing to stay here and see what happens. Either way, it's a choice. I'll stop there and turn it over to questions. Thank you.